Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Whether or Not. I'm your host, Caroline Castora, joined by my forecaster for this week, Connor Freidhoff. And Connor, do we have any interesting weather coming up for this weekend?
We do. Labor Day weekend's going to start out quite nice this time, but as we get into the latter half, we could see some soakers coming in, and that's going to set the stage for next week as well.
Well, before we get into that, I hear you have some pretty interesting nature in the news stories for us this week.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a new study that just came out from a couple of universities about Hurricane Harvey floodwaters and how that didn't affect everybody equally, as well as some exciting news out of the Space Coast as NASA is looking to get back on the moon for the first time in 50 years.
That sounds really interesting. For me, I have a story about how California is banning the sale of non-electric vehicles by 2035 and how lab octopuses might not have the same rights as other lab animals. But you'll hear about that a little more in the future. Let's get into nature in the news.
Pretty soon you might have a moon landing story like your grandparents did. NASA is exploring a multi-stage plan to send astronauts back to the moon. The Artemis program is a series of missions with the end goal of a week-long surface observation exercise. The first of these 3 launches is unmanned and mainly intended to understand the effects of space travel on the human body. The launch was scheduled for this Monday, but was delayed due to an issue with the liquid hydrogen supply. The second launch is scheduled for 2024 and will support a 4-person crew in a flyby of the moon, before the third and final mission in 2025 will involve the first touchdown on the moon's surface since 1972. Artemis 3 will also feature the first woman and person of color to walk on the moon's surface. Provided that the mission is a success, lunar missions are expected to become a regular occurrence for NASA.
Octopuses don't have backbones, or rights apparently. As the species is increasingly being used in research lab environments, it's becoming evident that they don't have the same protections from the federal government. The reason for this is that protected animals have a backbone, while unprotected animals like worms, bees, squids, or octopuses don't. These cephalopods have been used to answer questions in neuroscience, among other fields. Octopuses are smart, capable of navigating mazes, camouflaging, escaping their tanks, or hiding in coconut shells. It's difficult for scientists to determine whether or not octopuses feel pain, as experiments testing it has had conflicting results. Scientists are suggesting that they are capable of feeling pain. The Animal Welfare Act of 1966 requires humane treatment of primates and pets like cats and dogs. It doesn't, however, protect farm animals, racehorses, invertebrates, fish, or lab rats, and mice. In 1985, that was extended to all vertebrate animals. Governments have different standards and rules for animal treatment, but many researchers believe all animals should be treated with the same level of respect.
Property damage is a given in the midst of a hurricane landfall, but those effects can continue to wreak havoc years later. Hurricane Harvey decimated parts of the Houston metro area, killing 60 and causing $125 billion in damage. However, a new study from a collection of nearby universities such as Louisiana State, Rice, and North Carolina suggests that certain neighborhoods were disproportionately affected by the storm. Climate change continues to hurt the middle and working classes most, and Harvey was no different. In the study, it was found that Latino residences were more likely to be flooded due to climate change than predominantly white residences. In contrast, higher income neighborhoods were more likely to be affected by climate change-related flooding. Positioning by certain bodies of water also posed a factor, as many lower income families live in more industrialized areas, like near the Houston Ship Channel. As anthropology professor Dr. Samin Howe concluded, the climate crisis is affecting us all, but not all of us equally.
In a historic decision, California has pledged to ban gas-powered car sales by 2035. The regulation, set by the California Air and Resources Board, means it should no longer be possible to buy a new car that runs solely on gasoline anywhere within state lines. This could pose a variety of problems for a variety of reasons. First, if automakers don't ramp up production of cleaner vehicles, there could be a shortage. Second, there will be legal issues presented that could hinder the policy. With supply chain issues already plaguing the country, this could provide more issues for Californians. It's important to note that some states often follow California on pollution-related rules, which could amplify the problems that might occur. Some countries have already tried adopting electric vehicle policies. China orders car makers to produce a certain fraction of zero-emission vehicles annually. Norway uses tax incentives to steer consumers to buy EVs, which now make up 80% of new sales. As the deadline for internal combustion engine cars approaches, it will be interesting to see what adaptations will be made ahead of it.
Weekend starts out great, but there's a bit of a change coming. I'll detail that for you right now. Taking a look, high pressure system over Lake Erie. Other than that, it's going to be very nice and sunny. Temperatures above normal for this time of year as we get September started. So last blast of summer still kicking in, still hanging around in our region. However, Saturday is where we start to see a bit of a changeover. Parts of Pittsburgh, Washington County, southwestern PA seeing some showers, as well as bits of West Virginia, Kentucky, mainly the Ohio Valley. You see we got a cold front too coming in out from the Great Lakes. That's going to bring it back down here, and that's going to bring us even more rain on Sunday. Pretty much the entire eastern seaboard, all the way up New York, New England, down to Pennsylvania, down to the Tidewater region. We're going to be seeing plentiful rain showers. So some drought relief coming in, but over, of course, too much rain could cause some flooding in low-lying areas and areas where the soil has gotten extensively dry throughout the area. So, of course, if you see floodwater driving, turn around, don't drown, of course. Bringing it back to State College, 83 degrees on Friday. Perfect evening, perfect day to go for a walk, have a bike ride, of course. Stay hydrated while you're out there, because even though it might not seem too hot to some people, that sun's going to be beaming down on you. And, of course, wear sunscreen. Friday night, perfect evening for a night out, for just a walk out. 62 degrees, not too hot, not too cold. Some cloudy skies here, so it might be a bit hard to see the moon, but even then, still just a perfect night for just some light activity. Moving into Saturday, 85 degrees with a chance of showers. This is where we see rain start to move into the area. If you're in the southwestern portion of the state, expect some rain, maybe even a rumble of thunder. If you're in the eastern portion of the state, sort of expect some nice above average temperatures for this time of year. Again, summer's still hanging around, so you want to keep an eye out for that as well. Saturday night, 63 degrees. The rain is starting to move into the area, start to cross the middle portion of the state, crossing the Appalachian Mountains, moving more towards Harrisburg and Philadelphia. And Sunday, 85 degrees. That is where we're going to see our greatest chance of thunderstorms throughout the state. Pretty much the entire state has the odd chance of a thunder shower. So keep an eye out for that. If you have any outdoor activity, please keep an eye out. And of course, stay safe. And stay tuned. Student meteorologist Kyle Eck has a feature for us on trouble with development in the Atlantic Basin this year. Stay tuned.
The 2022 Atlantic hurricane season has gotten off to an unusually slow start, especially so if we take into account the aggressive preseason forecasts that have been issued earlier this spring and summer. On the contrary, something that we have seen in abundance of this summer is Saharan dust. This very dry air mass, as you may have guessed, originates over the Saharan Desert in Africa and is typically the most robust from June through August, or during the first half of the Atlantic hurricane season. As African easterly tropical waves begin to fire up in early summer, they move west into the Atlantic Ocean and usher large swaths of Saharan dust along with them as they push westward into the open ocean. Often, especially before the peak of Atlantic hurricane season, developing tropical waves can easily ingest large quantities of Saharan dust, which hinders these systems from further intensifying. This has played true this year, as we've seen only half the amount of normal named storms that we typically see in a season so far. However, the amount of dust or moisture in the atmosphere is not the only thing that impacts tropical cyclone development. Student meteorologist Delian Colon explains.
3 ingredients that we look for in TC development is that abundant moist air that we have been lacking due to the African dust. But we also are looking for weak vertical wind shear, as well as warm sea surface temperatures.
As we collect tropical cyclone data over the years, it can be helpful to take a look at what's going on in the tropics this year, and to also take a look back to previous hurricane seasons to see the atmospheric phenomena that played out during those seasons, and to use those seasons as a good analog to get a good indication of what may take shape later on this hurricane season. Delian gives some more insight on this.
This has happened in the past, so I believe in the hurricane season back in 1961, we had a pretty much storm-free August, but then once it hit September, storms started to develop, and after September, 9 storms were named, and 5 of those were major hurricanes. So not having a lot of activity in August doesn't mean we won't have an active season, and it's very important to remember that it only takes one storm to make landfall in a community and make impact in our community.
As we turn the calendar to September, the tropics are beginning to heat up, and the National Hurricane Center is highlighting multiple areas of interest, one of which has a good chance to develop by Labor Day weekend. If it gets a name, it would be Danielle. Delian has more in depth with this.
Now that the NEC is watching particularly one system that is past the Cape Verde Islands, as well as another tropical wave that is going to enter the map early this week. Like one wave after the other, it's an indication that the environment is pretty favorable for development. We have that weak vertical wind shear as well as the sea surface temperatures there to withstand a development. And now that the dry air is diminishing a lot, we have abundant moist air for the development of cyclones. It's important to note that we're also in La Nina state, so that favors TC development in the Atlantic, and that's forecasted to remain through the end of the year. So we still can see a lot of storms.
For this hurricane season, we are in a very rare triple dip La Nina, and combined with very warm sea surface temperatures, more moist air, and weaker vertical wind shear, things are beginning to look like activity will begin to increase in the weeks ahead. Now, climatological peak of hurricane season is on September 10th, but there is a secondary peak in October, and most activity typically tends to happen during the second half of the hurricane season. So also, remember, it only takes one named storm to make a hurricane season bad. Remember Hurricane Andrew in 1992 and Alicia in 1983? Those seasons were relatively inactive, but those storms alone made it very impactful. So it is important to stay hurricane ready and weather aware in case a tropical cyclone heads towards your area.
Bringing it back to the extended forecast, let's just get a quick summary of what we have in store this weekend. Highs in the 80s, lows in the 60s. Weekend looks great up until Sunday, where we have those consistent thunder showers throughout the state. So get your Labor Day fun in early this weekend. Looking out to the graphs for next week, average highs in about the mid-70s, but the end of the week could see some highs rebound up to the 80s. Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, soaking the week. Hopefully some drought relief for the areas that need it most, especially up in the northern tier. Wednesday and Thursday, though, just some light clouds and some sun. So make your plans for those days. And stay tuned. Caroline is back with the quiz answer to our Weather Whiz quiz. Stay tuned.
And now here is your Weather Whiz quiz question for the week. California has pledged to ban the sale of gas-powered cars by what year? Is it A, 2030, B, 2035, C, 2040, or D, 2045? And the correct answer is B, 2035. I don't know about you, Connor, but do you have an electric car?
Well, it's a bit out of my price range at the moment. I think an e-bike might be a bit more appropriate for this time.
I think electric vehicles are out of most college students' price range. That's it for this week's show. Be sure to join us next week. From the whole team here at Whether or Not, have a great day.